And welcome to another video Bike Fitness Coaching. This is going to be part 2, in which we will discuss KOPS. Part 1, we discussed knee extension angles, sit bone widths, cranks, saddle sores, too wide of saddle, hip rocking, millimeters don't make a difference, and height of the rider versus inseam. Again, today we'll specifically discuss KOPS in detail. The myth of KOPS. But first, some definitions. Let's talk about spindle versus axle. A bicycle bottom bracket. A spindle is the connecting rod between the crank arms through the frame's bottom bracket. They are often made of steel, which is usually a 24 millimeter Shimano standard, or aluminum, 29 millimeter for dub, or 30 millimeter. They rotate along with the cranks. A bicycle axle is usually defined as the rod at the center of a wheel hub. It can be a quick release, hollow with a skewer, or through axle. The key distinctions is the core differences lies in their function and motion. A spindle carries a load and rotates, like in a bottom bracket, while an axle supports a load and is often stationary. So should this actually be called KOPA, knee over pedal axle? Something to think about. But what is KOPS? KOPS is a horizontal crank alignment, one crank at roughly the 3 o'clock position forward and the other at a 9 o'clock backward position, and is a standard reference point in cycling, especially for bike fitting, pedaling analysis, and posture assessment. It does provide benefits during actual riding, and it offers significant practical and biomechanical advantages when used as a starting point and static checkpoint. So how is it measured? Well, there's 3 measurements that I've seen fitters use: front over the front of the patella, vertical to the front of the crank arm, over the tibial tuberosity to the center of the pedal axle, or center of the knee to the center of the pedal axle. Many have seen this position on videos as a replacement for KOPS. Although we will be discussing KOPS in detail, but in the meantime, please don't do this nonsense. This basically tells you how strong your core is, not where to place your saddle. Now, if you want a strong core, we picked up these exercises from the NASM website. One of the best ones I like is the ab wheel rollout. If you do these core exercises for 6 weeks, and again, you want to do deep core, not superficial core that the bodybuilders use. Use the power lifter deep core workouts. If you do these for 6 weeks, believe me, you'll be able to hold any of the positions in the last slide for as long as you want to. Several articles that we've researched did state that this is an understudied topic. But here are 2 of the leading ones, and we will see another one in the next few slides. So for KOPS, we'll be moving the saddle forward or backward to make sure the knee is over the pedal axle. The studies concluded from the previous slide that accurate bike fit measurement, and it is an accurate bike fit measurement. For many fitters, this position is the gold standard for setting saddle fore-aft position. There are several ways to perform a KOPS analysis. This helps align the hip, knee, and ankle so that the leg acts efficiently as a lever without excessive forward or backward knee travel. Why it matters: proper fore-aft positioning improves power transfer, reduces stress on the knees, and prevents movements like pelvic rocking or excessive hip flexor use. The biomechanical analysis of pedaling mechanics states the horizontal position occurs near the peak maximum of the power phase of the pedal stroke, which is the downstroke, where forces are the highest. And again, there were 45 sources reviewed. When your knees are too far in front, of the crank arms. This setup shifts your body weight and pedaling mechanics forward, which changes how forces are distributed through your lower body. The primary stresses and resultant anterior knee pain, front of the knee, the most common issue, increased stress on a patella tendon and quadricep or quadricep tendon, greater load on the patellofemoral. The kneecap can experience high shear and compressive forces or improper tracking as it glides in its groove. Why? With the knee positioned more forward, the quadriceps must work harder through the pedal stroke, especially at the top of the pedal stroke, where the knee is at max flexion and compressive forces are the highest, and also in the power phase. Increased quadriceps dominance and fatigue. Your quads take on a disproportionate share of the workload because the hip flexors, glutes, and hamstrings are less effectively recruited. Altered knee joint forces. Biomechanical studies, many fitters consistently link it to anterior knee symptoms due to the higher quad activity and a more closed hip angle at the top of the pedal stroke. Shear forces at the tibiofemoral knee joint and overall loading patterns shift in ways that overload soft tissue around the front of the knees. The knee often experiences a more flexed position at the top of the pedal stroke, which can increase patellofemoral pressure when the joint is under load. Now, when your knees are too far behind the crank arms or spindle, at the horizontal crank position, 3 o'clock of the forward leg, is the opposite of a forward saddle position and shifts your body mechanics rearward. This setup changes force distribution, muscle recruitment, and joint loading during the pedal stroke. The primary stresses and resultant posterior knee pain, back of the knee, is the most common complaint. Overextension or excessive stretch at the bottom of the pedal stroke, 6 o'clock, causing increased strain on the hamstring tendons and other muscles in the back of the leg, and structures at the back of the knee as well. Why? The more rearward saddle forces greater knee extension to reach the forward pedal, combined with altering hamstring length tension relationships. Hamstring and glute overload and fatigue. Greater recruitment and stress on the hamstrings, especially the upper portion near the pelvis and glutes, as the position favors the posterior chain over the quads. This can cause muscle fatigue, cramping, or pain at the hamstring insertion point, sit bones, or back of the knee. Riders often feel a pulling sensation or early burnout in the back of the legs rather than smooth quad glute power. Biomechanical modeling shows that a more backward saddle can increase tibiofemoral compressive forces, the main knee joint compression, by around 14 to 15% compared to a more forward position, partially due to higher eccentric load of the knee flexors. There's also lower back pain and pelvic issues, and reduced pedaling efficiency and power loss. So who is the largest opponent to KOPS? Let's meet Keith Bontrager. First off, I commend Mr. Bontrager for going to college and getting a BA or BS in physics. He attended UCSC, University of California, Santa Cruz, a very difficult degree to obtain. Here's what a BA or BS degree on physics currently looks like at UCSC. A BA in physics, ability to solve problem concepts in classroom and quantum mechanics, statistical mechanisms, and electromagnetism. Proficiency in mathematics and the mathematical concepts needed for a proper understanding of physics, and the ability to take measurements in a physical laboratory, analyze the measurements to draw valid conclusions, and lastly, ability to communicate scientific content effectively, both oral and in writing. Some of the classes that are required: Introduction to Physics 1, 2, 3, and 4, Calculus for Science, Engineering, Mathematics 1 and 2, Vector Calculus 1 and 2, Mathematical Methods in Physics. Very commendable. But what's missing? Biomechanics, the study of the structure, function, and motion of the biological systems using mechanical engineering and physical principles, but pertaining to the motion of the body. So basically the difference is the body has certain limitations that a purely mechanical system might not have. Second thing that's missing, kinesiology, the science study of human movement, applying principles to anatomy, physiology, and biomechanics to improve health, function, and athletic performance. And lastly, the third thing's missing in a physics degree is anatomy. So in his paper, The Myth of KOPS, which is currently hosted on Sheldon Brown's website, right here, he states a good bike fit has 3 general parameters: correct saddle height, correct saddle to bar distance, and correct fore and aft saddle position. I disagree with them that the parameters should be correct crank length, correct saddle height, correct saddle fore aft position. Keith also states the KOPS rule seems sensible enough. It puts the knee in line with the pedal at maximum pedaling force, which must help, right? He says wrong. The KOPS rule of thumb has no biomechanical basis at all. Well, we just showed a couple slides where there is a biomechanical basis for using KOPS. Most fitters follow Bontrager's assumption. This fallacy is called appeal to authority. I have never seen a bike fitter who has actually provided evidence to support or not support Mr. Bontrager's assumption that KOPS has no biomechanical basis for bike fitting. The appeal to authority fallacy occurs when a claim is deemed true solely because an authority figure supports it, rather than based on evidence. And Bontrager does not provide any evidence in his paper telling you that there's no biomechanical basis for KOPS. On the contrary, we've just seen several studies that say there is a biomechanical basis for KOPS. While legitimate expertise is valuable, this fallacy treats authority as infallible, often citing biased, unqualified, or anonymous figures to bypass evidence. Key aspects of the appeal to authority fallacy: arguing that a claim is true because X said so, instead of using evidence in this scientific case. We recently tested KOPS where a young client, and this just happened probably 2 months ago, a 17-year-old road crit racer who had a very long femur and short tibia, setting their knees way over the end of the front of the crank arm. And guess what? The reason they came in is because they had severe knee pain at 17 years old. His current frame would not work. We could not get the saddle far enough back, so a different frame was needed to get their knees over the end of the crank arms. And guess what? The knee pain disappeared. Now, back to KOPS. Here's another person, Mark Pfister, a mechanical engineer. Here is his website. He also reviewed Bontrager's KOPS. You can pause the video here and actually read his response. Here's a couple other papers discussing KOPS. One's entitled, "What's the Fuss About KOPS?" by Lee Prescott, the current owner and manager of IBFI. Here is the link. He states there's little research done, which we've agreed in other papers mentioning. The knee should be over the transverse arch of the foot. Again, it depends if you're measuring it from over the end of the patella, or the tibial tuberosity, or the center of the knee. And Phil Burt and Andy Pruitt also use KOPS. Bike fit is not a set of simple rules. The body is a massively interconnected chain. I agree with everything Lee Prescott is saying. Is knee over pedal spindle or balance test better for saddle setback? Use KOPS as a starting point, a guideline, and in my humble opinion, the best place to start. But basically, this is where the rider will feel the best. So here's some knee terms with respect to cycling. you'll hear the term knee flexor and knee extensor. A knee flexor, primarily the hamstrings, but there are also 5 other muscles that assist. Knee extensors are primarily the quadriceps femoris, 4 individual muscles. You will see these terms in most scientific articles you will be reading. I've also reviewed the Biomechanics of Cycling, a 164-page book by Bini and KOPS. They state converting muscle forces into crank power is critical for optimizing cycling performance. For that achievement, cyclists rely on the production and transfer power across the hip, knee, and ankle joints, which can be measured by assessing net moments and angular velocities at those joints. Studies indicated that the knee joint is the main driver for power, approximately 60% of the total power, followed by the hip and ankle, which mostly transfers power from large muscles, the hip, knee extensors, to the cranks. So if you read between the lines, KOPS is important to make sure your knee is aligned so you're not destroying it. And this is what they measured, the lower limb joint and segment angles. They also stated that saddle fore-aft positioning can change knee forces, joint loading. Excessive anterior projection of the patella in relationship to the pedal spindle in this figure and or increased knee flexion angle at the bottom of the stroke have been linked to larger patellofemoral compressive forces. And I would also argue shear forces as well. However, triathletes could be at even a higher risk of developing anterior knee pain and or injuries given they completely opt for a more anterior position, forward position, of their saddles, leading to larger anterior projection of the knees, approximately 6 centimeters compared to 2 for road cyclists. So you can pause the video on this and read it yourself. But basically, this early recruitment has been associated to early knee extension required to move the crank forward and hence where the highest shear and compressive forces are observed. So again, it's very important to get the knee in the correct position so when you're pushing down at the power stroke, you are not damaging your knee and everything is in line, pushing straight down, not putting forward, backward, lateral, medial strain and stresses on the knee. So again, we have biomechanical evidence that yes, KOPS does work and it makes sense and makes a difference in knee joint, knee health, power transfer, and efficiency in cycling. So why is it important? Looking at body sites for injuries, the knee, 23 to 50%, and the low back, 46%, are among the most common sites of pain and or injury in cyclists. An expected link between knee pain and increased knee flexion angle was observed in a preliminary study. Again, in their book, section 842, saddle height and horizontal position, the saddle can be adjusted in the vertical and horizontal directions without changing its inclination angle in the sagittal plane. In summary, for the horizontal position of the saddle, it has been recommended that the vertical projection of the knee should intersect the pedal axis based on the assumption that knee positions forward of the pedal axis may result in higher compressive forces on the patellofemoral joint. And again, triathletes are more susceptible to injury because they are more further forward. Dr. Andy Pruitt, using KOPS. So in conclusion, we've already looked at what happens if the saddle's too far back, what if it's too far forward, what damage does it do to the knee. So basically the experts are saying, in short, horizontal crank alignment, KOPS, is a great place to start and can be a diagnostic and setup tool. In general, it helps create a more efficient, comfortable, and sustainable pedaling position, which over time leads to better power output, reduced fatigue, and lower injury risk. If you're experiencing specific issues, knee pain, low power, discomfort in the aero position, a professional bike fit using this and dynamic references is highly recommended. And in final parting words, the myth of KOPS, it's not a myth. It does make sense, and there is biomechanical evidence.